When it comes to healthcare, here's the biggest issue with it. It changes like the wind blows. There is no way on God's given earth you're going to be able to have a real solid foundational plan for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now because the health insurance landscape changes so much. All right, everybody, welcome back. 10 Fears of Retirement. I'm Alexander Pushman, your host and author of this book. A couple things. Number one, this chapter is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about medical and insurance concerns, long-term care. This is actually chapter 4 in the book, fear, quote unquote, number 3. So here's the deal. Every single time I talk to a family, there's a couple things that always come out when I'm sitting with them, whether it's a current family or client that I work with or somebody I'm just doing a second opinion, having a conversation with. Oh, man, these healthcare costs, I'm really stressed out. I don't think I can retire because I think they're too expensive, or I don't know what's going to happen with them by the time I do retire. This is almost a consistent. It's very similar to that concept of running out of money, right? Hey, do I have enough money to retire? Am I going to run out of money in retirement? I mean, that's why these are the top 3. So let's talk about it and let's dive in a little bit because I want to set the stage on the landscape of health insurance, long-term care, that whole medical piece. And then I'm going to throw some solutions at you today like I always like to. So when it comes to healthcare, here's the biggest issue with it. It changes like the wind blows. There is no way on God's given earth you're going to be able to have a real solid foundational plan for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, because the health insurance landscape changes so much, right? Now, we could throw stones, it's corrupt and this and that. Let's not get into all that. Let's stay focused on how you can plan for this. So I'm sitting here telling you, hey, you can't plan for something in 3 and 5 and 10 years, so what do? Well, let's kind of unpack that. Usually the most common concern or the common fear I get is around this. I don't know how much it's going to cost. Based on what I'm looking at when I look at the marketplace or whatever it exists in your state and area, people are looking at, hey, it's probably somewhere around, let's just say $1,000 a person, to have health insurance. Now, there's different ways to go about that. And again, these type of things are things you want to talk with a professional. You want to talk with somebody who's specifically a fiduciary and has your best interest. Because one thing I will tell you in the insurance, the health insurance, specifically long-term care space, there's not always a ton of great people who have your best interest. There's a lot of people who may or may not be chasing commissions. Again, there's good and bad in every single world we work in, whether it's a police, a firefighter, a doctor, health insurance professional, financial planner, lawyer. There's good and bad of everything. But I'm telling you, in this space, that's when you really need to have people you trust and are giving you good quality information. So that's kind of like the first thing. Make sure you're just aware of your surroundings. If you don't have somebody who you can trust, of course, that's what we're here for. You can reach out to us, and we have absolutely extensive resources around this of good people. I don't want to pretend it's always me. I do have my health insurance certifications, my medical or my Medicare and all that. I don't want to pretend I'm an absolute expert pertaining to, going out and getting quotes and giving you every detail of a policy. I do it to keep people honest, right? It's always important to keep experts in your fold. So let's take it a couple steps further. So number one, you always want to have somebody that you can trust, you can talk to, get good information. Now, when it comes to health insurance, one kind of example is usually when people retire and they get off of their company plan, they're like, all right, it's going to get more expensive for me. Okay, fine. Now, think about it like this. You kind of only have 2 to 3 options. The first option is you go and you take your COBRA, right? And that's going to be through your employer. Historically, that's going to be expensive. It's there for you, but it's not cheap. Okay, A. B, you say, you know what? I'm going to go to the marketplace and I'm going to try to figure something out. Now, I live in Michigan. One thing I will tell you here in the state of Michigan is Blue Care or Blue Cross has Michigan, I would say, in what I call a quote-unquote chokehold. Now, what I mean by that is this. Blue Cross is the biggest health insurance company in Michigan. You go on the marketplace here in Michigan, and it's all Blue Cross. So they've done a good job creating a network through whatever it is, lobbyists, however they play their game, and that's fine. But you go to the net or the marketplace and you're pretty much only going to have Blue Cross Blue Shield options. Okay, fine. Now, those are also going to be pretty expensive in comparison to some other options I've seen. Now, the third option is you kind of go out to the private space. And this is where you really have to know your stuff. And that's tough as a person in your shoes who probably doesn't have your health insurance license, right? You haven't studied Medicare and health insurance policies and, hey, what's a PPO? What's a HMO? And diving into deductibles and co-insurance and all that stuff. So let me kind of give a couple things. Number one, a really basic thing when it comes to health insurance is people are going to say, hey, do you want an HMO or a PPO? HMOs, I want to say, are kind of like the B of the AB in this situation. They're the B. Why? If you go through an HMO and you go to the doctor, it has to be within network. So it has to be an approved doctor or an approved physician's office that's approved so you can get your insurance. If you go through a PPO, now personally, this is my personal input, I always do a PPO. I've had a lot of injuries over my life, right? And so if I need to go to a specialist, if I need to go to a doctor or, a naturopath doctor or something like that, I want to make sure I don't have to deal with the health insurance saying, hey, Alex, we're not going to cover it. So I always go through a PPO, and basically that's just saying, hey, you can go to whoever you want, and for the most part, as long as it's, a legit, medical doctor, it's going to be approved. So it just gives you that ability to kind of go to who you want. It doesn't have to be quote unquote in network and approved like a HMO. So that's just something really quick a lot of people ask questions about. So let's take it a step further. So we got the first option. Hey, I'm going to go on Cobra. I just left my company or I got laid off. And again, that tends to be more expensive. B, you're going to go to your local marketplace. Again, oftentimes there's going to be one company that kind of rules that space, at least specific to here in Michigan. Third option, you're going to go into a place like, a private space. Now, when you find those private ones, I was kind of explaining HMO, PPO for this reason. There's those church programs that are like small or large groups that are through a church that you can get. Now, a couple things to be aware of with those type of programs. First thing is a lot of them have pre-existing conditions exclusions. So if you have a pre-existing condition, whatever that may be, a lot of times those plans won't cover you. So you need to be aware of it. Two, you have to be aware of like what the deductibles are, what is covered, what is not covered. And as silly as that sounds and how basic as that is, that's where I see a lot of people get in trouble with those private like church plans. Now, some of them are really good, but if you're somebody who's got a very unique situation, you need to make sure that you talk to an expert and talk to somebody, again, who has your best interest. Where I go for insurance, so this is kind of interesting, and I don't want to say it's for everybody. So I live in Michigan. My health insurance professional, I had no affiliation with the guy. I actually got referred to him from one of my colleagues. He's a health insurance wholesaler. So he can pretty much operate in almost every single state in the United States, and he can pretty much offer any plan with any big, a legitimate approved company. Your Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, United Healthcare, like all real insurance companies, right? So I went to him. At the time, I was in the marketplace here in Michigan. I was paying about $1,500 a month for me, my wife, and at the time, 2 kids. So there's 4 of us, and I'm paying about $1,500 a month. I go to him. I get the exact same plan. It was basically equivalent to like a Blue Cross Blue Shield Silver plan, PPO. And I pay $869 a month. I mean, that is a real change. You know what I'm saying? That is dramatic savings. So through my own personal story, I've learned a lot about this. And yeah, I'm a professional and I've worked in this space, but it was through me personally going through and trying to find the best option for me and my family to save money. So my point is it's really important to just understand what your options are, talk to people who know what they're doing, talk to different people, get different quotes, understand what all your options are. And again, if you're somebody who's got a very unique medical situation, you have pre-existing conditions, make sure you understand what that looks like with your policy, okay? So first and foremost, my whole point to this is understand all your options, have somebody you can trust, but recognize, listen, when they passed Obamacare, right, through legislation, it changed the game. It's going to happen time and time again, so it's borderline impossible to have a game plan 3 and 5 years from now and know exactly what it's going to cost. And it's like everything I say in financial planning. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. Expect to spend a little bit more than you probably do. Why? You're never going to be a bad spot with that approach, okay? So let's go to the next one when it comes to like this whole health insurance medical piece. The next one I always get is a big concern. I'm not going to really talk a ton about Medicare here. We talk about it a little bit later in the book. But I am going to talk about this, long-term care. Man, oh man, I get all sorts of concerns. And guess where all the concerns come from? When somebody has concerns about long-term care, guess why? They went through it with their parents or their spouse's parents, and they had that immediate touch. I mean, personally, again, going back to my grandfather's story, right? My grandfather runs out of money. His last year, he was spent in a nursing home, right? And now, luckily for him, and I say luckily because he had in a situation where he didn't have enough money, he had ran out of money, so like Medicare basically picked up the whole thing, right? So you can get yourself in a jam though when you get into these long-term care scenarios. People have dementia, people have Alzheimer's, and again, it's usually people who are like, when I sit down with them, they say, Alex, I need a plan for my long-term care. It's because they've had a personal experience or they've watched their parents or somebody close to them go through it. And they realize, oh my God, this is expensive and a terrible situation for everybody, the person who's in it and the family included most of the time. I don't want to say all the time, most of the time. So what are things that you can do? Now, this is a biased opinion, okay? This is a biased opinion, but it comes from experience. I have never offered a family or a client a traditional long-term care policy. Not one time. And I'm not saying that there's not good long-term care policies out there. But what I am saying is there's different ways to skin that cat, if you will, without just saying, hey, company A, here's $100,000 or $50,000, and I may or may not use it. Because we've all heard the cheesy phrase, right? If you don't use it, you lose it when it comes to long-term care. Hey, we're going to pay into this policy, and I'm just going to say it's $50,000. But I end up never going into a home. What's the issue with that? What's the issue with me never using that policy? Well, the company just keeps that $50,000. It doesn't go into a life insurance. It doesn't come back to your family. It's gone, and you got nothing for it. You're just that's that game of insurance, right? So I'm not a big fan of that. One of the things as a financial professional and a fiduciary I'm always looking at is, hey, how do I keep the money with the family, but we can also accomplish the goal we're trying to get or minimize the fear or concern that's getting us to have this conversation in the first place. So let's talk about it. The average, now when I wrote this book, and let's just say, I'm recording this podcast and it's now 2023, 2024. Believe it or not, the average nursing home care facility ranges anywhere from about $4,200 to $9,000 a month. That's kind of the average range based on the intensity of care you need. If you're in like a traditional nursing home and you do need care, that's where you fall closer to that $8,000-9,000 a month. If you're somebody who can do your own thing and you just need a home to live in, a qualified care facility where you don't have somebody doing everything for you of those daily living skills, that's where it lands closer to that $4,000 to $5,000 a month. So it's not cheap, okay? So there are ones out there that are a lot more expensive. If you want to get a little bougie, get a little bit of nice, again, unique circumstances with medical needs, it can get more expensive. But that tends to be the range, $4,200 to about $9,000 a month. That's the range we're looking at. So it's not cheap. Some of the alternatives I've used to just getting a long-term care policy, again, my primary goal, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, my primary goal when I talk to a family is how do I keep the money in the family? Whether we use it or we don't use it, how do I keep that money with the family? So when it comes to long-term care, I'm going to throw a couple options at you. Here's the first one. You get a second to die life insurance policy with a long-term care rider. What the heck is that, Alex? So what it is it's just as it says, it's second to die. So hypothetically, I think, and again, knock on wood, I think my mom or my dad is going to end up in a home. It'd probably be more probable for my dad. He has more longevity in his family. His father passed away around 92, 93. He's got a pretty calm demeanor, so he'll probably live longer. So let's just say it's him. And we were worried about him ending up in a home. And my mom predeceasing him having XYZ concerns, whatever it is. So we go out and I say, all right, it's going to be a lot cheaper for me I'll be 40 this month. It's a lot cheaper for me to go get life insurance right now than my dad who's in his mid 70s, right? Okay. So we go out, I get insured and he gets insured and we put a long-term care rider on it. So we both have access to those policy provisions, but it's second to die. So the policy gets underwritten in, hey, who's it more probable that dies second? Me, right? The 40-year-old, not the mid 70-year-old. So they'll underwrite the policy with me, and which will then in result make it a cheaper policy that's a lot easier to pay for because, hey, they're banking on, hey, I'll probably live another 35, 40 years. Okay, great. We'll get our money, blah, blah, blah. The whole, suitability and insurance process that they go to figure out that premium. So second to die is just saying, hey, you get somebody who's younger, get the policy in two people's name, and then you have a long-term care rider on it. So if either of the people, obviously probably my dad in this scenario, end up in a home, there is a rider that has a long-term care benefit, and how much you put in the policy, depending on the company and how they write the actual insurance policy, will then dictate how much a month or how long that will last. So like those are the two big things you want to look at in any long-term care policy or rider, okay? First thing is you just want to make sure that you have an understanding of, hey, how much will they pay a month and how long will they pay it? In a worst case scenario where somebody's in a home and you need that benefit, okay? That's how you figure out, does it make mathematical sense or not? And then you're going to want to go back, hey, for this disease, this type of age, what are kind of the historics? These are conversations I have all the time with families because, again, there's always a math formula. There's always a process to figure out, like, hey, how much should this thing cost, right? So, all right, that's the first thing. Second thing, this is kind of common sense, but you pay for it out of pocket, right? Hey, you got to go into the home and it's $4,000 a month. Okay, great. I'm going to take $4,000 out of the investments every month and pay for it. That's common sense. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on that. The next one is when we get into the second to die policy. Again, a lot of people haven't heard of that. That's a little bit more complex. Here's another easy softball one that you can look at. Now, there's 4 types of annuities in the United States that we use for investing. I'm going to really quick go through those 4 types because it's very important on which one you pick to attach a same concept, long-term care rider. Now, the first type of annuity I'm going to talk about is what we would call a deferred annuity. Your Social Security, your pensions, right? You get a monthly payment until you pass away. That is what we call a deferred annuity. Now, you can get private ones through big companies. A couple I would list off. Everybody knows Nationwide, right? Peyton Manning. If you ever watch NFL football, you're going to know, Nationwide. Nationwide is on. That's what they do, okay? They do retirement accounts is how they put it in the commercials. It's fixed index annuities. It's life insurance. It's all that type of stuff that falls in this court. So a deferred annuity is basically pensions, Social Securities, or you creating a private one with a company like a Nationwide. I could list off 50 other companies in that space. So that's the first thing. That's how most people know annuities, but there's 3 other types that you have to be aware of. The first is a fixed annuity, okay? It's very, very similar to a CD or a fixed rate. Hey, I'm going to put my money in this account. There's no risk. There's no fees. And I'm going to get, 5% for X amount of time, a duration. Okay, that is a fixed annuity. Usually, and I don't want to say always, usually what happens is you go down your bank or your credit union and they're going to have a fixed rate offer. A lot of the times these fixed annuities, insurance and annuity companies can beat that. They're private. They know the game. So they might have a little bit more of a rate on that to get you to come to them. But oftentimes they're also a little bit longer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I don't see a lot of people going past that, but that's a fixed annuity. It's basically identical to a CD from a bank or a credit union. Again, it's a fixed rate, no risk, and they're giving you a duration for that interest. So that's a fixed annuity. Third annuity, fixed indexed annuity. Now again, full transparency. These are my favorite. There are good and bad of every type of annuity. A fixed indexed annuity, if I break down those terms, it's fixed. There's no risk, okay? To your principal, but it's indexed. Well, what's an index? The S&P 500, the NASDAQ. It is something in the stock market, so when the market's good, you participate in that growth. Now, there's things you have to know inside of these. Hey, are there caps? Are there participation rates, right? What's the margin on it? Are there fees? How many years is this contract? What's the liquidity per year? Again, if these are questions you have, please feel free to reach out to us. We have an extensive team. Myself, I take this stuff very serious. If you have questions, I'm happy to help you on it. But these are complicated things. You need to talk to a professional who, again, I'm going to use the term fiduciary, aka just somebody who cares and gives you straight shooting answers and actually has a heart and a moral compass. I mean, that's what we're really talking about here. So the fixed index annuity is my favorite, and those are usually the ones I will use for this long-term care policy, because you're probably like, Alex, what the heck are we talking about annuities right now? Fixed index annuities, you can get one of those, and you can attach a long-term care rider. I'm going to talk about that. The last annuity, though, really quick, and I'll circle back. The last annuity is called a variable annuity. These are annuities that you can lose money or principal. You got to be aware of the fees, okay? Usually variable annuities have a higher fee rate. And again, they're variable. Listen to the word, variable annuity. It can go up, it can go down. It's attached to the stock market. And you can get riders on these. And usually that's why the fees are a lot more expensive inside of these. They have a bunch of riders, whether you do or don't need them. So understand there's 4 types of annuities. You can get riders. Usually it's the second two or the first one, that deferred annuity. Like if you did it through like a Nationwide, hey, I'm going to give you $500,000 and you're going to give me $4,000 a month for the rest of my life. I totally made that up. There's so many variables that go into that, but you can get a long-term care rider on that. Now, there's all sorts of multipliers and da-da-da-da. I'm not going to spend time on that. Fixed index annuities and variable annuities are usually where I see these long-term care riders. And it's the same principle before, is you can attach this rider. If you don't use it, most of the time there's a fee, but the fee is minimal in comparison to like a traditional long-term care policy. Usually, example, hey, long-term care policy, here's $100,000, here's $50,000, and you don't use it, you don't get it back. That's a pretty expensive, choice or mistake. In these, you can still have it to where, hey, I set up this fixed index annuity. Again, that's always been my number one pick for a lot of reasons. I put it into a fixed index annuity with a long-term care rider. Sometimes that rider will be included and you don't have to pay a fee for it. More often than not, you do have a fee for it. It might be 0.5%, it might be 0.75, it might be 1.1, it might be 1.5% a year. But you still have an index. It can still grow. The principal's protected, right? And let's just say you get this annuity and it lasts a year and then you pass away. Well, guess where the money goes? Let's say you put $500,000 into this, right? Or $100,000 or $50,000, whatever the number. It goes to your beneficiaries. The money stays with the family. And there's good markets, you're going to get that index growth, whatever that par or cap or margin is, and you're going to still get growth as the market's good. So this is a really nice way to check the box of getting some additional protection if you end up in a home, but then also that money stays with your family and you can participate in market growth with no risk to the dollar. So it all depends on what your goals are, right? I could throw you 50 different people out there and they'd have 50 different choices, but that tends to be the one I lean into for those reasons, okay? So you can always get an annuity. Again, a fixed index annuity is always my number one pick for these. And then get a long-term care rider added to it. Okay. Now, we're going through a lot with this medical and insurance stuff, and I promise you it's not the most exciting conversation, but it is very important. And if you're listening to this, I'm sure that you're somebody who's had these thoughts and concerns. Another thing that you can kind of look into and get into is when you're looking at that health insurance, how does Medicare support me? If you're, those Medicare gaps, the supplements, there's different things inside of there that can support this conversation, but you just got to make sure you understand how that works. So, the biggest thing is I kind of like take a step away. So make sure you have somebody you trust, right? That you can talk to. And I think that's on any topic. I don't think I'm blowing anybody's hair back. But the second thing is, getting into a situation where you understand what all your options are on health insurance, understanding that's going to change, and plan for maybe a bigger number than you want, because again, based on legislation, based on Congress, that stuff all can change. And then that third space, when we get into this long-term care stuff, you can get a traditional long-term care policy. And I guess I didn't really say this, but there were some really good policies kind of in the 90s and the early 2000s. There's even some older ones that I've seen even come back, like literally when they first started. Like I saw one from like the late 80s. I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest long-term care policy I've ever seen. But then they kind of figured it out. So my whole point to that whole long-term care thing is if you don't use it, you lose it. Recognize that. My goal is always to keep the money in the family for the third time. But the bigger piece too is just make sure you understand how these policies work. Again, I'm not saying all of them are bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that you have to understand them. You have to understand how they work, understand who gets the money if you do pass away. These are all important things to understand. And again, my primary goal is always to keep the money in the family. So that long-term care traditional policy, I don't want to say they don't exist anymore pertaining to like being a good competitive one. It's just harder to find them because these insurance companies kind of figured it out. So just recognize that. And that's why I use some of these alternatives. Hey, I'm going to get a second to die policy with a long-term care rider. Geez, you can do indexed universal life, whole life insurance. There's a lot of options of adding these riders. And again, for different folks, there's different strokes, and you just got to understand which ones are the best fit for you. You get an annuity, add a long-term care rider. Yeah, of course, you can pay for it out of pocket. I mean, seriously, on that subject, I had a client, his mom had like $700,000 in AT&T stock, okay? And for like 10 years, she just lived off the dividends. And then she ended up in a home. So they kept everything exactly how it was. She'd get her dividends. It paid for her to be in a home and it was all good. She passed away and the kids split the AT&T stock, and that's that. I mean, you can have a really simple situation like that. It's just not a lot of people are sitting on $700,000 of a dividend paying stock, right? So you just, you got to understand everybody's got different situations. So, those are kind of the main topics I like to talk about in the book. But what I will tell you is everyone's different. Health insurance, long-term care, Medicare, it is complicated. Make sure you understand what you're looking at. And again, if you don't have somebody in your pocket you can talk to, please reach out to us. Reach out to me. This is what I do all day long. So this kind of wraps up our third chapter, or I should say our fourth chapter in the book, 10 Fears of Retirement. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions, do not hesitate. This is when I get a ton of questions around. Also, anytime there's an election year, don't let them scare you with this stuff. It changes like the wind blows. They're all going to talk trash about the other side. Don't let them scare you. All right. So, hey, have a wonderful day. I hope you enjoyed it, and God bless you.